What's up guys, Weasel Fight Dippities here. Now there's very interesting stuff revolving around Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. Now the rematch seemed like it was going to be done, signed, and ready to go for January. But we've hit a roadblock. And it isn't Conor McGregor, surprisingly. According to reports, Conor McGregor has actually been a lot easier to work with for this deal because he wants to continue his career. It's actually Dustin Poirier who's been a thorn in the UFC's back. He is not happy with the deal they're offering him for this fight as well. You may have remembered that this is the same reason why Dustin Poirier versus Tony Ferguson did not happen. Dustin Poirier was not happy with the deal offered to fight Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson waited out for him, and Poirier left him out cold and went to Conor McGregor. Now we don't know what the deal is. We don't know how much money they're offering Dustin Poirier, but I have a hunch it's probably somewhere around the same deal, pointing to the rumors that Michael Chandler was going to get paid more than Poirier for his debut fight. And with some speculation that the UFC is not happy with Poirier, the fact that he turned down the offer for the Tony Ferguson fight as well. But here is the thing, man. If he turns down this offer, I don't think it's going to go well for him if Conor McGregor moves on. You have to think of it like this. Dustin Poirier is not Conor's priority. He's not going to favor Poirier over the continuation of his career, right? He wants to fight. And there are other fighters out there that are going to be just as big, just as fun as fighting Dustin Poirier, right? They could do Justin Gaethje, which is actually what the UFC is looking to if Poirier turns down this offer. Justin Gaethje versus Conor McGregor. If Khabib decides to retire or then negotiate with Khabib to fight GSP at 165 in order for Khabib to vacate his belt, Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje makes complete sense to be for the vacant title. All in a huge plan for business. But people have to remember about Justin Gaethje. He's always said he does not like to take short notice fights. He took it against Tony Ferguson, and that is because I think his coaches kind of pushed him to take it. He didn't really want it after it fell apart the first time, right? He said he's done with it. So who knows what's going to happen here if the UFC turns to Justin Gaethje with like a month and a half notice. And if that happens, if Justin Gaethje does not take the fight, they always have Tony Ferguson. Ferguson will 100% fight Conor McGregor. It's a fight he wants and he said he wanted recently. And I believe Conor McGregor, with some of the respect he threw at Tony Ferguson lately, he will give Tony Ferguson a chance. I 100% think so. I actually think he would fight Tony Ferguson before fighting Justin Gaethje. Given how much respect he has for Tony Ferguson, how much he doesn't really respect Gaethje. I know a lot of people would love to see Tony Ferguson fight Conor McGregor, and Tony Ferguson is a bigger name than Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, given viewership, social media numbers, all that stuff. Even though it was during lockdown, it was the first pay-per-view on Fight Island, Tony vs. Gaethje did 700,000 pay-per-view buys, one of the most of the entire year. Even though not everybody watched it for Tony and Gaethje, there was still 700,000 people that bought the pay-per-view that watched the main event, right? So even if they weren't as famous before, Tony's definitely more famous afterward for the amount of people that watched him fight. And also you have to consider Dustin Poirier, when he fought Dan Hooker in his last fight, it only drew 1.07 million viewers during the main event. That's actually less than the prelims of UFC 249, which did 1.15 million viewers. And when you look at social media numbers, you look at the Instagram followers, Twitter followers, all that stuff, it does seem like with stats, Tony Ferguson is a bigger name than Poirier and Justin Gaethje. All of this shows that Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor may be an even bigger fight than Dustin Poirier or Justin Gaethje, and also for the fact that Tony Ferguson would take the fight easier than Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje will. He's easier to deal with the UFC, and by numbers, it'll probably be a bigger fight. So if Conor wants to move on, he definitely has other options, but if he doesn't move on, this can spell bad for the UFC, and it will be huge for Dustin Poirier to get what he wants and get the leverage that he needs to make the deal better for himself, which is what all the fans want to see. In Poirier's last fight against Dan Hooker, he was paid $150,000 to show, $150,000 to win. That does seem a bit low for a guy at his stature, a championship level fighter with a big name and a lot of following behind him. And I really hope he's able to up that pay, especially given that it's going to be against Conor McGregor, right? You would think that Conor would make Dustin Poirier get more money, just like his previous opponents. The only guys that didn't get a fortune from fighting Conor McGregor were Donald Cerrone and Eddie Alvarez, and that was mainly because of their negotiating tactics. Remember when Conor was making fun of Eddie Alvarez because he didn't negotiate for better pay, and then we all saw Cerrone's numbers and how shocking it was that he got paid so low. Everybody else that fought Conor McGregor made a fortune. By backing up Dustin Poirier and staying with this matchup, Conor is also going to make it hard for the UFC, which is what he's been doing recently. Remember with the DMs and all that stuff, he was very frustrated with the UFC, just like when he announced the sparring match with Poirier. This may be another opportunity for him to stick it to the organization a little bit more. If that happens, Conor is literally turning into like the next Stone Cold Steve Austin from the old days of WWE, sticking it to the boss kind of thing. Who thought Conor would be like the anti-hero of the UFC? This will ultimately cause some kind of fight where the organization is going to try to get other fighters to get on board and maybe even scrap Conor vs. Poirier entirely and not let them fight at all. Take away both their chances of fighting for some kind of belt in the near future and all that stuff, man. But Conor and Poirier, they might go on with their plan to make this a pay-per-view sparring match. Maybe they're going to close that down as well, given their contracts that the fighters are not able to do these kind of exhibition bouts and whatever. Putting stuff on pay-per-view without their knowledge and their approval, it could become very tricky for Conor and Poirier if they really push the organization that much. It's going to be extremely interesting how this all plays out. And ultimately, I do think Conor will defeat Dustin Poirier. I don't think it changes too much from their first fight, to be honest. They're both way better than back then. But ultimately, in a boxing match, which is what this fight is going to be, I do not see Poirier beating Conor, especially with the way he throws punches, especially with the ways he tries to chain up his combinations against such a longer counter striker with much better movement. I do see Conor also defeating Gaethje. It would be a tougher fight due to the leg kicks, due to amazing movement from Gaethje, athleticism, and power that Dustin Poirier doesn't really have at the same level. But ultimately, I do see Conor defeating Gaethje. I think he's able to counter some of those big winging punches. I think he's going to be able to pressure Gaethje a bit and take like half steps back just to fire out that left hand on any punch that Gaethje tries to break the pressure with. The leg kick's going to be a major problem for Conor though. That is going to throw the entire fight into a frenzy because we haven't seen Conor have to deal with too many big leg kicks in his career. How many heavy leg kicks did Conor take in his career? Not much, man. I can't even count on one hand how many times he got kicked hard to the legs. And with that wide stance of his, it's probably going to throw off a bit of his balance, and maybe Gaethje's going to be able to fire out some punch after his leg kick. But if you notice what happened to Dustin Poirier when he got leg kicked, he used the trajectory of the leg kick to step and find the left hand, and that is actually how he finished off Gaethje. When you're throwing an inside leg kick with your power leg against the opposite stance fighter, you are kicking their leg to the outside of your lead foot. That is going to line up their left hand, and Conor could probably do the same thing that Poirier did to Gaethje. So that is a bit interesting, and that is another thing I do see why Conor being able to land that left hand and eventually TKOing Gaethje as well. Conor vs. Tony Ferguson is a bit interesting because Tony fights differently depending on who he's up against. He's a game plan guy. He goes by a strategy, by tactics of the style that he's coming up against. You would have to think against Conor, he would have to take it a bit slow in the first two rounds, not go crazy and get countered because Conor is probably the best first round and second round fighter in the lightweight division. He's way too dangerous for Tony Ferguson to extend some of his punches and try to put the pressure on him. Look what Gaethje did to Tony Ferguson with his counter punches and his movement. Conor will do that to another level, especially in those first two rounds. So Tony might have to put on pressure, but be defensive as well. Don't throw out too many strikes, probably go for more takedowns in the first two rounds just to tire out Conor McGregor. And once the third, fourth, and fifth roll on, that's when Tony Ferguson could potentially put some heavy pressure on him, put the metal to the pedal, and do as much as he can to try to finish off a tired Conor McGregor. But with the way I saw Tony fight Justin Gaethje, that's a super alarming result. And I think Conor just needs one left hand to really hurt Tony Ferguson. Maybe not knock him down, maybe not rock him beyond belief, but it will cause more damage than what Gaethje was able to do with one punch against Tony. Not because Conor essentially hits harder, you know, if you count PSI and all that stuff, if you measure the punches, I don't know if Conor hits harder than Gaethje, but it's his precision and how much he extends into that left hand. Torques his entire upper body, his entire shoulder into that left hand, and that is something Gaethje does not do. And because of that, you could generate more power and deal more damage with that one single punch. I don't think Tony Ferguson is going to be able to take too many of those, especially with the damage he took from Justin Gaethje. He's older as well, man. I don't like Tony's chances anymore against Conor McGregor. If Dustin Poirier finds a way to stay in the fight or he gets a deal that he wants, I still think he's going to lose the fight. If Justin Gaethje comes in there and Conor wants to fight Gaethje, maybe due to some beef they have, you know, Gaethje said a bunch of things about Conor in the past, especially after he hit that older man in the pub. Conor might want to prove something against Gaethje, who just fought Khabib. I think he's going to be able to defeat him as well. And if Tony Ferguson comes in on this, maybe because Gaethje doesn't want to fight on short notice, I still think Conor will be able to defeat Tony Ferguson. So I do see a very promising, bright future for Conor McGregor in the lightweight division. Can't wait to see how this all plays out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.